Hey guys, Matt here with a particularly large update video concerning new opinions and findings on pre-HUNDEGNI content, significant timeline alterations, newfound legitimacy concerning the LUCID investigation group, and much more. As usual, I must make it clear that a lot of what I'll be talking about here is best understood if you've already checked out our older videos regarding similar topics. In this case, you'd be far more informed by first viewing our starter pack playlist, and also viewing the more recent videos surrounding LUCID. Now with all that being said, let's just jump right into things. The primary image we'll be covering in this video is the silver photograph of a board littered with various papers. This image was originally found on a website called pointingninjawatcher.webs.com, which is no longer available, and it was part of a whole host of hidden images, which we will talk in more depth about later. For a long time, the words on these pages were deemed as almost entirely illegible, but thanks to one of the guys over on our Discord server, things were able to be cleared up significantly. We can now make out a majority of what these previously unknown papers have to offer. In general, the main purpose of the pages seen here is to outline certain activities or expectations AOH was engaged in around the time the calendar suggests. While some aspects are fairly easy to understand, such as information which seems to give orders to shadows regarding when they should be active and when they shouldn't, some strange things begin cropping up the more you begin to read into it. Changing gamma views, mentions of offices and lobbies, updating a server, adding hyperlinks, and engaging in conversation over phone and mail. All of it works to suggest Arrows of Heaven's operations extended to far greater heights than what would have been otherwise only on PlayStation Home. Originally, mentions of the offices, lobbies, and contacts between individuals by mail were all looked at with intense confusion, as it goes against what we had previously believed about AOH, which was that its members were not in contact with one another outside of home. Additionally, the presence of the board itself would suggest that the members of AOH worked under one roof, and all worked off the pages seen here. Several of us refused to believe this could truly be the case, as it would open up a whole different can of worms that Unhinged would have almost certainly mentioned, or that AJ would have at least hinted at. As such, and after much debate, we eventually came to the assumption that the offices and lobby referred more to online chat rooms. PlayStation Home offered private spaces that groups could talk in and share information in, and it pretty much goes without saying that various other sites around that time period also offered very similar things. These chat rooms are likely also related to the mentions of changing gamma views, adding hyperlinks, initiating test runs, and of course updating the server. Notable mentions of mail more likely refer to emails rather than snail mail. And as for the question of why all of this is on the board, we believe that this is simply the result of whoever took the photo preferring to print out materials sent to them by AOH. Some individuals simply prefer having physical copies to look off of and organize. Or at least try to organize, as the board is quite cluttered, likely as a result of its owner not taking down old work and rather simply placing the new materials atop it. That'd also explain why various papers are marked up, with some lines scribbling out bits of text or even highlighting them. The more you look at it, the more this comes across as being a distinctly individual choice. However, no theory is perfect, and I couldn't continue the video without also mentioning some oddities the server began to pick up on. It particularly dealt with how the instructions listed on basically all these pages comes across as purposely vague, or made to appear more detailed and complicated than they really are. I won't read over everything, but just take a look at the way some of this is written, and tell me it sounds like a normal way of listing instructions or information. Does this imply everything in the photo is fabricated to some degree? Possibly, though it was also noted that perhaps the person who printed off the initial instructions later transcribed it all personally, and boiled them down to their more basic concepts, which were easier to understand. I personally do this quite often while quickly jotting down information found in the HUNDEGNI investigation. These short, indistinct ramblings may only make sense to the person who is familiar with them, rather than making sense to everyone. Moving on for a second, this image has come up before in our Pointing Ninja Z timeline video and was the basis by which we estimated when AOH was created. We had originally thought the calendar here was from 2009 and that operations began on April 1st, since this correlated well with the original Z and Brett's death during that 12-week period. Unfortunately, we made a major oversight when it comes to all of this, as it was recently pointed out that April 1st is on a Wednesday and Easter falls on the 20th. Both these values correspond to a calendar from the year 2014, not 2009. Since AOH was certainly around before 2014, the April 1st start date for AOH's creation is now firmly debunked. However, that doesn't mean we haven't come up with any new ideas. In fact, one particular discovery found within this image might be incredibly handy in figuring out when AOH began. At the top of this particular page reads a strange message of Blas56. While we initially thought this could in no way be analyzed to a strong degree, one of our members went the extra mile, forming a theory that Blas56 was Arrows of Heaven's way of dividing each of their months into categories. As such, April 2014, when this photo was taken, marked the 56th month of AOH's lifespan. Using some helpful online calculators for determining dates, we subtracted 56 months from April 14th, 2014. The final date that marks blast number 1? Well, that ends up as August 14th of 2009, only 2 months after the original Z ended. While we obviously cannot trust the exact day value, the fact that subtracting 56 months from the date the calendar shows brings us to a time so close to the end of the original Z, and it makes far too much sense to simply overlook. The Gled upload times still implied that Brett died early on in Z's run, on March 27th, but the AOH group didn't truly form until several months later. Also keep in mind that this does fall in line with what Unhinged originally explained regarding how the friends of Brett began honoring him in their own specific ways until Suited Man came along and regulated everything. It is my belief that from April through August, the friends were not under any specific rules, but it was sometime in August that Suited Man created Arrows of Heaven proper, and the rest is history. Obviously, this is quite a big change to our perceived timeline. As such, I'll be making an eventual update video wherein we go over the timeline once more, perhaps now factoring in Gled as well. Moving away from the heavy stuff for just a moment, I'll touch on some other things we couldn't help but notice about that board. This graph features headings of red, blue, green, and yellow. Colors featured prominently in HUNDEGNI 3.3. A couple binary pages are also hidden about the board. We can't see enough to identify anything, but it is a weird choice on the part of the person who printed all of this to include a sheet of all binary, unless perhaps the solid portion rests just below it, covered by other pages. A photograph or other printed image of some kind peering over the right side of the calendar could in fact also be the Z logo, as both are rounded and feature a similar harsh black outline. Lastly, the filter used in this image seems to have more going on than we gave it credit for in the past, as what appears to be scratch marks and other muddled dark areas can be noted around the board, almost as if another image entirely was overlaid atop this one. What purpose that could serve is anyone's guess. Yet another large finding was noted as we recently looked back at the original file names given to the Arrows of Memory photos. I mentioned this before in quite an old video, but the original AOH site which housed all these images also included their original file names, which could be viewed simply by saving an image to one's computer. These names, the important ones anyways for this particular theory, consisted of ProjEd6, ProjEd 18, ProjEd 70, ProjEd 33, ProjEd 455, and ProjEd 34. And another image which we apparently never found the file name for, and with the site no longer being able to be reached, we'll likely never know it. This was initially just considered a cool find and then forgotten about until a member of our server noted that the letters PE are featured in the small black box of the Lucid obituary photo. Immediately a connection formed, wherein it is believed PE stands for ProjEd, and the following linked number of 17 pairs perfectly alongside it to make for ProjEd 17. This falls perfectly just before ProjEd 18 and would insinuate that Lucid somehow has access to one and possibly more of the Arrows of Memory images, which they are now using for their own gain in some manner. This also leads us to treat Lucid far more seriously than we had before. While we'd initially still believe they could be trolls, the idea that they'd utilize such an obscure discovery within their image and still not make it clear that that's what they were doing leads me to now think that Lucid is far more informed than we'd initially thought. and that their descriptors used in this black box are incredibly relevant and important. We can presume the date utilized in this photo is now accurate, meaning Proj Ed 17 and all the images before it are prior to the original Z, as the image was taken in 2003, 6 years before Z began. Proj Ed 18, on the other hand, must mark quite a large jump to roughly after Brett's 2009 death, as it does feature the AOH logo, a symbol which would presumably not be in use from 2003 to early 2009. And all of this leads us to the final theory covered in this video. What if the Gled Twitter page's 100 tweets are actually 100 of these Proj Ed images? Sure, there is one photo labeled as Proj Ed 455, but we are now thinking that that could just be a typo and that its actual placement could be Proj Ed 45 or Proj Ed 55. All the other numbers fall perfectly in line as being below 100. These ideas absolutely blew my mind the more I began to think over them, and they make quite a bit of sense as opposed to the 100 Twitter posts all being text, something that the HUNDEGNI videos have rarely utilized as opposed to imagery. Could Lucid have used this image in their obituary as a way of warning Gled that they have access to other Proj Ed photos, a sort of blackmail perhaps? We can't say for certain since Lucid still hasn't responded to any of our attempts at contact, but given their antagonistic behavior, it wouldn't be much of a surprise. Interestingly, the obituary did mention Brett's favorite activity as being photography. Perhaps this indicates Proj Eds 1 through 17 were all taken by Brett, and someone else, presumably Gled, continued things from there, with images all his or her own. Recent looks into the obituary photo has revealed that it's hiding much more than we'd originally suspected. A high contrast version shows a bizarre divide between two of the individuals, and it also becomes clear that the background has been painted over. The sides of the image have also been obviously cropped, the image has been stretched vertically, blur filters are placed over the upper left and lower right corners, the saturation has been tampered with, and, of course, the faces have been smudged. We believe Lucid is responsible for all of these changes, as they may have suspected the image could fall into our hands and wanted to ensure we wouldn't get any more information than necessary. Meanwhile, if Lucid wanted Gled to find the obituary, he or she would clearly recognize the image, even in its altered state, and know that Lucid meant business. This begs the question, what is being hidden exactly? Obviously, we can't know for sure. The faces are blurred beyond anyone's ability to reconstruct, and the blur filter at the edges doesn't seem to be masking anything important. It has been noted that the leftmost figure has a more feminine appearance, and that the chest region almost looks to be blurred as well. Could this be the mysterious Sarah individual mentioned in HUNDEGNI 2.8? A case could be made for it, especially when the image is compared to this picture utilized in the final PN video, which also features 3 figures, with the leftmost person being a girl in a red hood. If that's the case, then would this middle person be Suited Man? And are the two perhaps holding hands just off camera? Theories have gone wild concerning all of this, and frankly there's nothing to prove or disprove it. The fact that the image was cropped and the background was masked over would imply that there were important background elements in this image that Lucid did not want anyone else knowing about. The way the individuals pose in the image almost seems like it's a group photo, really, with others potentially to their sides, behind them, or even in front of them. Lucid has purposefully photoshopped the picture down to its basics, leaving only those necessary details which only Gled could recognize. This is obviously an insane amount of material, which is all theoretical, though a vast array of the things I've listed throughout this video are, even at the very least, monstrously coincidental and will highly feed into how we look at Lucid, Gled, and older information surrounding Pointing Ninja. A majority of the findings and theories we've covered wouldn't have been possible without the great people over on our Discord server. I'd like to thank everyone who's contributed, and as always, information I've missed or could be covered in greater detail will be added in updates within the description, along with the link to our server if you, the viewer, are interested in joining in. Thanks as always, guys. Matt, out.